If it is impossible to bounce lasers off the moon's bare surface, as the Mythbusters and other propagandists have alleged...
Sorry to interrupt in the middle of a sentence, but no one in Mythbusters, or anywhere else for that matter, has ever claimed that it's impossible to bounce a laser off the surface of the moon and see its reflection.
Do you really need to hear it again? Okay.
There is a reflecting prism there that acts like a mirror, placed by Apollo astronauts. Now, if there was nothing at that point but rock, that would be the last you would see of your laser.
The whole premise of his video is built upon the denial of this statement. By denying what his allies have previously claimed, he can turn around and try to pin it on those who proved them wrong, accusing his opponents of making a straw man when he knows they didn't.
Earth-based facilities use the reflectors to get accurate measurements to the moon. LRO can get accurate measurements by bouncing its laser directly off the surface of the moon because it's 8,000 times closer than this laser.
Irrelevant. The function of Lola is proof that the moon can bounce lasers off its bare surface, which contradicts the claims made by Mythbusters and Red Zero. Claims you, of course, deny they made. We contacted Macmillan again, this time to ask why her laser did not detect any return signal when they fired it at the Lunar Highlands. We included the passage from the National Geographic article in question. This was her response.
When laser light or any source of light strikes a surface such as the dust on the moon, some of it does get reflected, but it's scattered in all directions. A little bit will be randomly scattered back in the direction it came from, but that's a very small percentage of the light that struck the surface, and it's completely lost in the other sources of background light. In contrast, when light strikes a retroreflector, most of it gets reflected back in the precise direction it came from, so the reflected light stands out from the background. The experiment in the 60s used a much stronger laser than ours, so that even with the small percentage that was reflected back toward Earth from the random lunar surface was still measurable. It still would have been brighter if bounced from a retroreflector, but there were none on the surface of the moon at that time. Today, with the much higher levels of air traffic and space traffic, it would be very hard, or perhaps impossible, to get permission to shine a laser that strong up into the sky. They also weren't worried about timing to the extent we are, so their light pulses were longer. Because we want to measure the timing very accurately, we send out very short pulses of light, and that also reduces the amount reflected.
This is not what we were told on Mythbusters. On that show, we were told the only way to get the laser pulses back to Earth would be if there were a retroreflector on the moon. But when pressed along these lines, we are told, yes, of course you can bounce lasers off the moon. You just need a more powerful laser than what we use today. Sounds good enough to the casual reader, but there is one major problem with this statement. The pre-Apollo laser is not more powerful than the modern laser. According to this 1970 document, A High Radiance Laser System for Lunar Ranging, the first laser return from the moon was achieved with a 50-joule Ruby laser. In this experiment, a 0.5 millisecond laser pulse was transmitted. This is also acknowledged in the K3PGP experiment corner article, Optical Echoes from the Moon Without the Use of Retroreflectors, May 1962. Experiments have been conducted to focus pulsed optical radiation onto the surface of the moon and to detect the echoes. A Ruby optical maser radiating pulses of approximately 50 joules of energy, 0.5 millisecond duration, at 6943A was used as the source. When we do the energy to power conversion, this means the 1962 laser had a power of only 100,000 watts. That's 0.0001 gigawatts. On the Mythbusters special, we are told the Apache Point Observatory uses a laser with 1 gigawatt of power.
Here's the thing, this little laser pointer is about 10 milliwatts. That's great, but it's not going to make it to the moon and back. That thing, however, peaks at 1 gigawatt. That's 100 billion times more powerful than this is. That's what you got to have to make it to the moon and back.
This means the Apache Point Observatory is using a laser 10,000 times as powerful as the MIT laser. This directly contradicts Macmillan's explanation. If it takes as little as 1/10,000th of a gigawatt to bounce lasers off the moon's bare surface, imagine what a 1 gigawatt laser will do. Well, that's pretty much all that's worth commenting on. The rest of Astrobrand's video is blatantly false and repeated accusations of straw man arguments on my part, when in fact the only straw man regarding the retroreflectors is his own. As we have seen throughout the past 4 videos, unlike Astrobrand, I have no need to quote my opponents out of context, build up straw man arguments, or deny what people on my side have claimed when they turned out to be wrong, or try to intimidate my opponents.
I've hurt you, and I wish to go on hurting you.
Or Photoshop pictures of my opponents for humiliation purposes. Yet Astrobrand frequently does this. He gloats and hypes about being able to tear apart people's videos and demolish precious moonhoax evidence, but in reality, he never does any research to back up his claims. He relies heavily on statements from Jay Windley's website that never withstood scrutiny to begin with, probably because he struggles with even the most basic concepts. Some of his responses are just downright embarrassing, like mistaking a smudge on a poor quality Gemini 8 photo for the moon, and then using that smudge as a reference point for star position comparisons. Or his downright laughable assertion that the moon's low albedo is irrelevant because a telescope, a light amplifier, requires a filter during lunar observation.
The moon is 240,000 miles away, and we need filters to look at it through a telescope. So albedo arguments here are utterly irrelevant.
When Astrobrand is not propping up these erroneous assertions, he attacks those who disagree with him on a very personal level.